We now know the specialties of the Paldean starters, we know the mission rewards of the first anniversary fest missions, and we also know the dream gifts that we get from the anniversary event. Some of these, from a developer point of view, are probably meant to be surprises, so if you like a good surprise, maybe don't watch this entire video in full to avoid spoilers, especially for the part about the dream gifts. So stop this video wherever you feel like you're knowing a little too much. Now we know the specialty of the 3 Gen 9 starters for Coco, Sprigatito, and Quaxly. Against the speculation of most people thinking that they're going to be skill specialists, they are ingredient specialists, which means this video cannot go through whether they are meta relevant, since it's all about the ingredient list and ingredient rate. Without both of these information, which cannot be obtained until the release date, everything is just speculation. No matter how good the skills are or how fast the speed of the Pokemon is, it's all irrelevant until we get those two crucial pieces of information. Now, I kind of speculated this might happen from yesterday's video about the berry typing of the 3 new Pokemon. In fact, they do change typing throughout the evolution, and all 3 of them do. Where Coco changes to Ghost typing when it becomes Skeledirge, Sprigatito becomes Dark Berry typing when it evolves into Meowscarada, and Quaxly becomes a Fighting Berry typing for Quaquaval. Now, that's largely neither a good or a bad thing, because they aren't berry specialists anyway. It is a little more relevant if you got berry finding for them to match the correct berry typing, but otherwise, we really should be focused on their ingredient list, which again, we don't have the information for yet. But what is interesting is that you could use Quaxwell, so the second evolution of Quaxly, to help on a Suicune team, maybe for the Suicune event. Not forgetting that since the Entei event, during the event, the legendary's skill will likely be boosted because there will be a higher skill rate that favors the typing relevant to that event. So for example, during Entei event, fire Pokemon had skill trigger boosted, skill level boosted. So using Quaxwell to complete and round off your water team might actually make sense. But that sacrifices some speed because Quaquaval on its final evolution will have better speed than Quaxwell. So there's some trade-off there to use an under-evolved Pokemon. Regardless, it's just something to think about. If it happens to match what ingredients you need for the dish type in the Suicune event, for example, well, it might make a lot of sense to keep it as Quaxwell rather than evolving it all the way to Quaquaval. And then perhaps after the Suicune event, we can all evolve our Quaxwell into Quaquaval. I guess by that token, would that also mean we should keep Sprigatito as Floragato in case the event after is a grass legendary? What if Celebi is to come next and it also has Helper Boost? Now this is something that's very speculative and I can't really make this recommendation because that would mean that you're sacrificing having a good Sprigatito line that's evolved all the way to Meowscarada in order for you to get a higher skill level, more inventory, faster speed, and farm more of the ingredients that you need. But again, it just depends on what ingredient Meowscarada is going to have. If it's something you've already got enough ingredients for, and you don't really need Meowscarada, well, maybe keeping it as Floragato for the meantime until we figure out what the next few events might be a good idea. I'm less concerned about Fuecoco because Entei event is already behind us. Unless, of course, you plan to use Entei, you've got a level 6 Entei, where you prefer to run a team of 5 Fire-type Pokemon that uses Crocodile instead of another Fire-type Pokemon. But I feel like Fire-type team building is more well-rounded already that it doesn't really need Crocodile in the team unless the ingredient is correctly matching your dish type of that week. So for me, for Coco, I may consider evolving it all the way to Skeledirge. But for me, I don't have a really good or high skill level legendary at this stage, so it doesn't matter to me that much. For anyone who does use an Entei or does want to use a Suicune, these are things you might want to consider not evolving all the way, because it's a one-way street. You're not going to be able to go back to the pre-evolution. Now, a lot of people actually speculated that these 3 Pokemon will be skill specialists, and that's because, well, the Kanto starters are ingredient specialists, the Johto starters are berry specialists. It almost seems to fall into place to have them as skill specialists. Well, interestingly enough, they do have different skills, unlike the Kanto and the Johto starters. We've got Cooking Power Up for Sprigatito, we've got Charge Energy S, which is a self-healing skill for Skeledirge, and we've got Charge Strength M. So I will give a skill analysis here, but it's in the context that they are ingredient specialists, and a really good ingredient specialist shouldn't spend that much time on your team. Because once they farmed enough ingredients for your pot, for your dish, they should be swapping out for a berry specialist for something else that can continue to provide Snorlax strength with no limitations, because ingredients are limited by the pot size. So that means that Charge Energy S is a fine skill to have, because the main purpose of it is to maintain Skeledirge's energy. This skill complements any team, because anytime you don't need the healing on Skeledirge, given that it's already going to be level 3 main skill, which is a lot of self-healing, if you assume the skill rate is the same as other Pokemon, then what you can do is you change out Skeledirge to allow your energy for everyone healer like Gardevoir to trigger on someone else, and there's really no wastage here. You probably won't need to spend any main skill seeds on Skeledirge and still have it maintain well above 100% energy throughout the day. As for Quaquaval, Charge Strength M is a first of its kind to go on a non-skill specialist. So this one's interesting. I would like to see what the skill rate is like on this Pokemon, but to be quite frank, it probably isn't going to be worth any main skill seed at all, because if you could spend a main skill seed on Charge Strength skill, why not spend it on a berry specialist who spends more of the day on your team? If for some reason Quaquaval's ingredient list allows you to actually use it on your team most of the day, then I can see some more value in Charge Strength M. But I would be very hard pressed to recommend spending any main skill seeds on it. As for Cooking Power Up on Meowscarada, once again, first of its kind. The first time we've had Cooking Power Up on a non-skill specialist, and it happens to be on an ingredient specialist, which on paper actually sounds pretty good, because you want an ingredient specialist who does a lot of ingredients to run Cooking Power Up, so you can dump any excess ingredients into the pot with less limitations. But I feel that this skill is more for the free-to-play players, because for anyone who plays the game like myself or a whale who have good camp ticket running every week, this skill just gives you more pot space to dump ingredients as extra ingredients, which means you don't get recipe bonus or the recipe level bonus applied to the ingredients. The extra ingredients are not stronger than having favorite berries, which scale with the level of the Pokemon, whereas ingredients typically scale with the recipe level, but if they're just extra ingredients, it doesn't even scale with that. So no matter how high level your ingredient specialist is, if you're just farming a single cacao that's used as an extra ingredient, it's really just worth 151 points no matter the level. Whereas if you run a level 50 berry specialist, well, it keeps scaling up as you level up the Pokemon, and there's no limit on feeding berries. So Cooking Power Up, it's much stronger for people who can't normally cook the strongest recipe, because you can unlock that recipe by running this Pokemon. So I feel that Meowscarada is a great addition for free-to-play players. For players like myself, the skill isn't that useful. Of course, this is a separate discussion to the Sunday night cooking expansion for Monday morning. But in those cases, you should be running skill specialists for this skill so that they have a higher skill trigger rate. Unless for some reason your Masquerada actually has really good trigger rate, then you should use it on Sunday night as well. And of course, if you haven't already completed a team of 4 or 5 cooking power up Pokemon, you can add Masquerada to that team. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the variety that they've given us in terms of the main skills with the new Pokemon. But it all boils down to what ingredients they are going to have. And I'm not mad that the Paldean starters are ingredient specialists, because I feel like for a long time now, we've been stuck with the same ingredient meta. And of course, I'm talking about the mono ingredient spread. And once again, we'll need to wait till Monday, the Pokemon's release, before we find out whether there's any change to this mono ingredient list. Now, if you've already farmed every Pokemon on this list, so you've got all of the ingredients covered, well then the new Pokemon can maybe do mixed ingredients instead. It's totally up to you how you want to shuffle around your Pokemon for your ingredient coverage, but the good news about the mono ingredient build is that every time a new, perhaps power creeping Pokemon gets released, you only lose one Pokemon at a time. And I actually mentioned this in the very first mono ingredient video I ever made. And now it's becoming relevant because we're getting 3 ingredient specialists released at the same time. And I speculate they're not going to have the same ingredients. So that means we need to worry about 3 Pokemon being removed from this list. But here's the problem. If you've been investing in mixed ingredients, then several of your Pokemon get power creeped. Let's take Charizard for example and Beware. Now of course, Beware's better if it farms corn, but if you happen to have invested a corn sausage Beware and you have a sausage ginger Charizard, let's say one of the new Pokemon, maybe Fuecoco, farms sausage at base level, so it could do mono sausage for example. If you've invested in mixed ingredient lists, what happens is if Fuecoco is better than either Beware or Charizard, then both of these Pokemon become power creeped. Whereas if you invested in a mono corn Beware and a mono sausage Charizard, then Fuecoco can only power creep Charizard, removing Charizard from your team once you get a really good Fuecoco. Of course, you don't really have to hunt a Fuecoco if it's a mono sausage Pokemon when you've already got a mono sausage Charizard. You can just keep using Charizard as well. But this just shows you one other reason why mono ingredient build is resistant to power creep. For mixed ingredient investments, multiple Pokemon can be power creeped at the same time. So I guess it's oddly satisfying when you have a mono ingredient build with the Pokemon in your box. You would tend to only lose one Pokemon at a time whenever new ingredient Pokemon gets released, but of course in this case, because 3 ingredient Pokemon are getting released, maybe 3 of them will be power creeped. Or perhaps nothing will be power creeped at all, because we actually have some gaps in terms of ingredient coverage at this moment. And that's because some Pokemon are just really hard to farm. For example, getting a good Absol is really difficult. So if you want mono ingredient Absol for cacao, maybe for apples, because no one has apples at level 1 in terms of ingredient specialists, then you'll pretty much be stuck not having any cacao or apple for a long time, especially if you just started the game. Delibird is in the same situation. 16 bars to catch, cannot evolve for more inventory. Each time you catch, there's a 1 in 9 chance of getting mono egg. So that's another Pokemon where we actually have a bit of a gap. We need someone that's easier to hunt, costs less, can evolve for these ingredients, eggs, apple, and cacao. Which was why we had honorable or early game alternatives at the time of describing this situation. We had Abomasnow do level 30-60 eggs. Of course, at level 1, Abomasnow doesn't do eggs, which is a problem at level 30 since half the time it just gives you 2 tomatoes instead. For apples, it's just as bad even in the honorable early game alternatives because Pinsir is still very costly to catch. Basically, there's no easy to catch ingredient specialist for apples at all. As for cacao, one early game or honorable alternative was to use Blastoise, which is a lot easier to farm. We can just catch Squirtle, evolve it twice, have Cacao at level 30 and 60. The problem is, then it takes Blastoise away from doing milk. And remember, a good ingredient specialist shouldn't spend a lot of time on the field to get the ingredients that you need. You want to get them out of your team as quickly as possible once you've got what you need. So if Blastoise isn't doing Mono Milk, well, there's no other Pokemon to do Mono Milk for ingredient specialists. So here's to hoping that the 3 Paldean starters are going to be Apple, Cacao, and Eggs. And that would simplify and change this mono ingredient list significantly enough that it's actually worth catching all 3 new starters to complete your ingredient coverage. But which Pokemon is going to get which ingredient? I think there's a clear case for one of the Pokemon on what ingredient it should be farming. You might remember from this game, Pokemon Scarlet Violet, that something special happens during Fuecoco's introduction. So let's take a look. That's right, Fuecoco disappears, Quaxly is playing with milk, whereas Sprigatito is smelling leeks, while Fuecoco is sneezing on what appears to be an apple. Or it could be an orange, I'm not too sure. Now, when I asked Piggy what fruit she thought this was, she said it's a mix of apple and orange. So I guess that's the new ingredient, apple and orange. But also, Fuecoco just kind of looks like an apple anyway, so I'd be very mad if Fuecoco doesn't farm apples. Now, let's take a look at the Datamine rewards from missions and dream gifts from this event. So this is a good point to stop watching the video if you want a little bit more surprise for this event. So the mission requirements and mission rewards are listed over at Cerebi.net. They are also available on Raidenex's website as well. We are getting incenses for the 3 new starters. Try to get to Master 1 no matter what you do, even if you're a new player, because then you can get Quaxly. It shouldn't be too difficult. Green grass progresses pretty quickly. Then for week 2, also try and get to Master 1 and you'll be able to get all of the free candies as well. Otherwise, we're getting a total of 10 Poke Biscuits, which is nice, some handy candies, some Dream Shards, and a Friend Incense. I would probably hold on to the Friend Incense because we are getting an extra hungry Pokemon for the first week every day of the week. So you might want to hold on to the Friend Incense for a Pokemon that has more friendship bars to fill, since the starters are likely only 5 bars to catch. As for the dream gift, so this was what everyone was waiting for, information on the dream gift and what we actually get from it. Now I have to say, I was a little disappointed that there are no skill seeds in the dream gifts. But to be fair, it wasn't that long ago that we got a free main skill seed, and that was with the 20 million downloads. We get a bunch more candies, water, fire, and grass candies. We get a total of 25,000 dream shards. We get a total of 5,000 diamonds, total of 500 sleep points, lots of ingredient tickets, some handy candies, and then we get the incenses again, which is kind of nice. Hold on to your Quaxly incense for the Suicune event if you're not in a rush to catch Quaxly. So while there are no skill seeds in these stream gifts, I am pretty happy with the abundance of materials they are giving out. The amount of materials is well worth you to log in every day of the event. So thank you to Cerebi.net and also Raidenex for the data mining to give us a heads up on what to expect from this event. And that marks the end of the second information video about the anniversary event. And that marks the end of the second information video of the anniversary event. Stay tuned because there's likely going to be a lot more information to come, especially about what they might announce every day for the next week during the event. But most importantly, what ingredient list are the 3 Pokemon going to have? Is it apple, egg, cacao, leek? And a shout out to the 25,000 Dream Shards.